This movie is about functions. We're going to introduce functions. We're going to take a look at the components of a function called arguments. We'll see that some of the arguments are required and some of the arguments are optional. And we'll take a look at volatile functions, which are functions that require no arguments at all. To begin, what's a function? I found a definition on the internet that says a function is an equation where any x plugged into it will yield exactly one y. So a function requires inputs and it generates an output. In Excel, there are about 350 functions. They're located in the Formulas tab in the function library. There are financial functions, logical, text, date and time, lookup and reference functions, math and trigonometry, more functions like statistical functions, engineering, cube, information, and compatibility functions. This is one way to access functions. Another way to access functions is to go into the worksheet, type an equal, and any letter for which there's a function that begins with that letter. I've typed a V. I have a list below that shows me functions that begin with V. By way of demonstration, we're going to take a look at the Vlookup function because you will inevitably use a Vlookup. If I follow the V with an L, there is only one function that begins with VL. It is a Vlookup. At this point, you'll get a description of that function. It says looks for a value in the leftmost column of a table and then returns a value in the same row from a column you specify. By default, the table must be sorted in ascending order. Ignoring for the time being what that exactly means and using the Vlookup sort of as a general reference to show you the elements of any function, I'm going to press Tab to load that function into cell E11. And now I get some different information about the Vlookup. I have a series of elements. The first one is bold, Vlookup underscore value, comma, table underscore array, and so on. These elements are called arguments. These are the arguments or the inputs that go into the function Vlookup. The first one is bolded because Excel is waiting for me to define the Vlookup underscore value argument. I'll input 100 just to put something in there, press the comma, and we've moved to the second argument. Excel now wants me to define the table underscore array. That's the second argument. The third argument is column underscore index underscore number. It's abbreviated, comma. The last argument, range underscore lookup, is what's called an optional argument. It's in brackets, which means it's optional. It means that you don't have to define it. You can leave that placeholder for that argument blank. I'm going to escape out of this and show you that there are some functions that don't require any arguments at all. Now, returns the current date and time formatted as a date and time. Tab not only does now not require any arguments, you can't put any arguments in there without generating an error for this function. So in order to get the result for this function that requires no input, as I said, there's no arguments, Control Enter, moving the cursor out of the way. 10/19/2012 is the current date. 7:06 is the current time. So that's an introduction to functions. There's about 350 functions built into Excel. They're listed on the Formulas tab in the function library in one of a number of different groups. You are also able to pull up the list of functions by putting an equal sign and any letter for which that letter is also a letter that a function begins with. You can sequentially type letters until you narrow the function list down to the one you're looking for. Press Tab, load that function into the active cell. You'll get a display of the arguments that are required for that function and the optional arguments where you can define the inputs for that function. Press Enter or Control Enter to enter that function into the active cell. We also saw where there were some functions that don't require any arguments at all, and they are called volatile functions.